Hello and welcome back to Enlighten Us Arabic. Let's get started. Today you're joining us for lesson 21 and we are looking at the Masdar. What is the Masdar? Well, the literal translation or the literal definition is source. It's where something originates from. Grammatically, however, the Masdar is an ism, and it's an ism that refers to an action, but importantly, it's an action that's absolute. And what exactly does this mean? Well, unlike a verb, the masdar doesn't have a tense. It's not confined to the action that it's describing to, say, the past, the future, or the present. Compare, for instance, the sentence, he ran. Look at ran there with he likes running. Look at running there. Ran, it refers to an action, but it refers to an action that happened in the past, a specific activity that happened in the past. Whereas here, we're talking about a general preference, not something that is confined to a particular point in time, but rather a preference, the liking of running all the time. Right, let's move on. So in terms of masdars, there are actually several types. So we have al-mu'awwal, al-sarih, al-marra, al-hay'a, al-mimi, and al-sina'iyyu. Today, however, we're only going to focus on al-sarih, and at later points we'll look at some of the others. Let's have a look at some examples. So we have, for instance, the verb kharaja, he went out. This is our past tense verb. The masdar for this is al-khuruj. So the underlying idea here is the idea of going out. We have kataba, he wrote. This is our past tense verb. And we have al-kitabatu, writing. That's the underlying idea. And notice here kharaja and kataba are verbs. They're in the past tense, whereas al-khuruj and al-kitaba, these are ideas that have no place in a particular time. So in terms of al-masdar al-sarih, we actually have two categorization. It breaks into two. So you have what's called a sama'i and you have al-qiyasi. So a sama'i means something that is audible, something that you can hear, whereas al-qiyasi talks about following a standard, having a particular standard. In terms of al-masdar, that's a sama'i, this is something you'll learn to identify on a case-by-case basis. It's something, pardon the phrase, you'd learn to listen out for, rather than there being any visual indicators that this is a masdar. It's something you'll learn to pick up with time as your vocabulary grows. This one, on the other hand, you'll notice that there's a specific pattern to it. You'll notice that these particular masadir, they have a particular pattern. They all look a certain way, or they all have a standard that they follow. And now going back to our idea of the standard versus the audible types of masdar, well, whether the masdar for a verb is sama'i or qiyasi, it depends on the verb form. What do we mean by verb form? And we'll look at verb forms in much greater detail a little bit later. Essentially, the underlying idea is how many letters are in a particular verb. Sometimes in Arabic we refer to this as three-letter verbs and non-three-letter verbs. But we'll look at verb forms in later lessons. The thing to remember now is that verb forms relate to how many letters are in a verb, the number of letters in a particular verb. we've come to the end of the lesson, so let's have a mulakhas. We've been looking at the masdar, and we said that the masdar is an ism that pertains to an action that is absolute rather than occurs at a particular time. So it's not an action that has a tense. It doesn't happen in the past, present, or future. We focused today on al-masdar al-sarih, and we said that there are two types. We have al-qiyasi and a sama'i. The qiyasi follows a particular pattern. The sama'i, you learn to identify this over time. Now, which one do we use to determine the construction of the masdar? Well, this depends on the verb form. Largely, this depends on whether our verb has 3 letters or whether our verb has more than 3 letters. And we'll look at verb forms in much more detail in later lessons. Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to head down to the comments and answer the quiz. See you in the next one, inshallah.